but the term for it is actually Web 3.0, but it's the same thing. So this will be a very simple overview for you to follow a little bit what everyone more or less are speaking about today. So after this class, you will know more about the history of internet and the technical development from Web 1, because everything when it comes to internet started with Web 1, went into Web 2, and today we are entering a new era, and that's Web 3. So you will also get the basics and the definition of what Web 3 is all about. And you will get some examples about the Web 3 applications that you already know about, but you maybe haven't really understood the connection to Web 3. And then you will also get some of the possible future developments that we will see and are already seeing with Web 3. So as I told you, Web 3.0 is the same thing as Web 3. It's just more simple to say and to write Web 3. When you Google this term, Web 3, you will find a lot of different explanations. And most of these explanations are most often very connected to technical terms. And for me, for example, that is not coming from any technical education, or I have not even got really an interest about technology in itself. For me, if I read a text like this, I feel like, oh no, I read the first sentence and then I put the text away or whatever it is, because it's words and it's also a language that I'm not used to. And that's what most of us do when it comes to things that we are not familiar with. If we read a text or if we hear someone speaking about something we know about, it's much more easy for us to integrate. And that's normal. But in this case, I do recommend each and one of you to, even if it feels a little bit like a totally new word, take a step into it. You don't need to learn everything at the same time, but start to learn a little bit. This I already told you about. Yeah, because the reason to this is also when it comes to Web 3, there will be connected to a lot of opportunities for the average person. And now we're not anymore speaking about only the big companies, only the one with a lot of money, only the one with a lot of knowledge. We are speaking about the average person that can actually have a benefit of Web 3. That is mostly what Web 3 is about. And of the upcoming years, we will see these opportunities coming and open up more and more. So if we are a bit prepared, you will also have more easy to see these opportunities than if you close yourself today and think that it's too complicated. I don't want to learn anything. Sooner or later, each and one of us will be part of this era. Exactly the same thing as we went into internet. Many of us were skeptical to internet. Today, it's a part of our life. So it goes step by step, but always when it comes to things that can also benefit you as an individual, it's of course better to start applying early. So Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3, if we then look a little bit about the history, a little bit about explanation, and also the definition of these three. So Web 1, that started already in the 1990s. I don't know how young or old you are, but if you was born in 1990s, you are raised with Web 1. That's like internet is nothing new. That's a part of your life. But if you are like me, that I was already an adult at the 1990s and even got my first kid in the 1990s, then this was something new for me. I needed to learn. I needed to understand many things. I for sure had a resistance at that time for computers, for mobile phones, for everything in the beginning because it was new. But at that time, internet consisted of static web pages. So it was about read only that we could do. Read only means that when you opened up a page on internet, you can read the text and you could use that information. If you wanted to look up a word, instead of taking a lexicon or a encyclopedia, a book, you could use internet to find this information. That was a part of Web 1. So right now, there are platforms like Facebook, you have Netflix for movies. These did not exist in Web 1. These came later. So the big ones in Web 1, that was websites like Britannica Online, Yahoo was one of the first, where you could find information. So that's why we say Web 1 was about read only. It was about giving us information. When it comes to IP, HTTP, URI, HTML, was the provider of the technical infrastructure in Web 1. Then in 2000, the dot-com bubble actually was knocked out. A lot about pages was about .com in Web 1. But then in the 2000s, these more or less disappeared more and more. So many of the internet companies, they also disappeared from the market. It was like a huge amount coming in first, and many then disappeared during the 2000s. And regardless of this setback, the tech world, they kept focusing on further developing innovations. So then came JavaScript, it came HTML5 and CSS3. These are totally technical names, so it was totally new for me too, but it's a development from the first ones. And that then resulted in the rise of Web 2. So Web 1, right, oops. I need to do like this. We can move this and we take away this. So while Web 1 was mainly about transmitting information and creating login, if you had anything, a page you wanted to log into with Web 1, you needed to have a username and a password. You can still see this on a lot of pages. You need to create a password and a username. When it comes to Web 2, it was more about interaction. So users, they make their data available in different service providers, such as social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and all these platforms, e-commerce pages, Amazon, and so on, and also different payment providers. And that means that it also comes an application that you can download as an application. You didn't only have the information page where you could read information, and you did also you started also during Web 2 to be able to log in through these providers. So if you have a Facebook account, you can have a password and a username, but you can also log into another page with your Facebook account. So you connect your Facebook account with another page and you use Facebook to log into that account, or you use your Google account to log into another page. So that was what was created in Web 2. What happened now? So most often the login was then during Web 2 created by a platform. I just told you this. So if we take, for example, Amazon and Facebook as an example, unlike Web 1 websites, two Amazon and Facebook users can access the same web page, but see completely different content. If I log into my Facebook, Nurul log into his Facebook, even if we are on the same platform, we can see totally different things. One thing is, of course, because we have different friends to follow, but also when it comes to the contents. And that is because both Facebook and Amazon, for example, they receive additional data from us users. What are we looking at on the internet mostly? If I looked at some shoes, suddenly I can see these shoes pop up in my Facebook like an ad, while Nurul had not looked at these shoes, so he will not see these shoes in his Facebook, for example. So that is how Web 2 started to interact. So actually you and I, we provide these pages with our own information. So here you can see then Web 1, username and password, read only. Web 2, the development of Web 1, where the platforms then started to also receive different information from you and me as a user. So we could start to sign in with Google, we could start to sign in with Facebook, or even with Twitter. Web 3, that I will speak more about, is still also, of course, being part of Web 1 and Web 2. It's not that we just cut this off and only start with Web 3. Web 1, Web 2, especially Web 2 will still be there, but a lot of the Web 2 will move into Web 3. And Web 3 will be more about, for a login, you will use your own wallet. You will not be needed to be connected to any platform for doing this. It's your wallet, for example, a MetaMask wallet, and that's how you then log into different pages. Web 2 is about centralization, and what could be then the issue with this? To being connected to a centralized connection. So Web 2 has changed the way we communicate and interact with each other. So we are going now from the Web 1, where we could do a mobile call using, if I had Telenor, for example, and I made a call, I could only call through Telenor directly from my mobile to another person's mobile. With Web 2, we can use these applications that we have given out information to. So if I have the application WhatsApp, instead of using Telenor directly, I could use Wi-Fi, or as long as I have any internet, I can use my WhatsApp to do my mobile call. So I don't pay anything to my mobile distributor, Telenor. I'm going through the Wi-Fi connection, the application, and do my WhatsApp call. So that is what Web 2 also created, that kind of services. So in Web 2, we can also shop on Amazon. We can stay in other people's properties because we can book an apartment, a room through Airbnb, for example. And we can also pay via online banking and fintech platforms. So Web 2 has without any doubt increased our benefits to make it more simple and easy for us. And through it, it has also created new challenges, because you know, with new innovation, challenges will also come. So Web 2 is based on a server client structure. And that means that the centralized private corporation, Facebook is a private corporation, it's a company. Google is the same. All these different applications and companies we see in Web 2 has a norm organization behind, but it's owned by someone. You have a CEO, you have a company connected to that platform. And that also means that we are leaving our data out to these companies. So that means that these corporations have an enormous monopoly power, and also to create barriers to enter for other potential competitors. So it will be, and we already see that, and we have seen it, that it will be the big ones that survive. The small ones is not at all having the same possibilities as the big ones that already set their huge foundation. So all Web2 applications are controlled by centralized corporation. Centralized means that there is a third party in the middle that is handling the big parts of the whole system, including the entire banking and financial system. When it comes to payment, centralized means that you have a bank, you have an institution in the middle that is also everything is going through. So the Web3 is breaking up the market power of these centralized players by replacing the centralized server client infrastructure with distributed ledgers. And the most common type of this kind of ledger is blockchain. That is where the blockchain comes in, because the blockchain is transparent, but it's also something that has no centralized part in the middle. I will not speak about the blockchain today, but I just want to mention it here as a part. So instead of all data being stored on centralized server, it will be outspread across decentralized computer network, meaning that many people is instead of control, instead of one organization in the middle. That is decentralized. So you take the power from one big organization and let more individuals be part of it. That's decentralized. So centralized entities with previously acted as intermediates, like the banks, for example, will instead be outdated because the power will instead go to the individual persons more and more. So if we check an example here, you can see the Web2. You have a server in the middle, you have different clients, and all the interactions will end up in the server in the middle. If it's a bank, if it's another institution, if it's Facebook, if it's whatever it is. That was what Web2 is about. It's centralized. So all the clients are connected to the server in the middle. When it comes then to Web3, as I told you, it looks totally different. The servers are still there, but it's not the server that is making the power. That's the network. That's each and one of the clients. The server is just a part of the total network. So everything is connected between each other. So no one has the power in the middle. I will explain this a little bit better also, so no worries. So if you are sending money today from one bank to another, and you use the centralized servers of the respective banking provider, the bank acts as an intermediate by carrying out your transaction. That's how it's working with all bank systems today. So you, the user, must hand over all your data to the banks that is involved and rely on them to execute your transaction correctly. And of course, the bank is charging you for doing this because they also need to earn money. So they take a fee for doing this service for you. So that's normal banking as we know as today, the typical Web2 banking. In Web3, it looks a little bit different. So you can send your transaction via decentralized blockchain. For example, Bitcoin blockchain, it can be Ethereum blockchain, it can be Polygon blockchain, any blockchain you can transfer transaction. And this blockchain independently verifies your transaction. And it's using algorithms and mathematics, and of course, a lot of computer power for doing this. So unlike with Web2, banks are no longer needed as an intermediate. Also, that means you, the user, can keep control over your data. You don't need to handle it out to a centralized organization or institution. And since there is no centralized actor making money from the transaction, there are no intermediate fees to pay. When it comes to cryptocurrency transaction, there is still, of course, gas fees. There is fees for doing the transactions, and that is to reward the different people that are in the network, but it's not going to one simple person. It's to verify that the transaction is going the right way. But it's most often much lesser than it will be when it comes to a centralized part that is doing the transaction. So in other words, Web3 should return data and also the ownership rights back to the user. And that is at least the idea with Web3, to bring back a bit of the power we have handed over to third parties, giving out all our user data to different platforms, to banks and so on, and bring that power back to each individual. So examples of the Web3 application, as I told you, Netscape web browser, I don't know if you remember Netscape, was probably the starting point of Web 1. For some of you, you might even remember Cat Web, but that was not a web browser like that. That was more like a search where you could search different pages, Cat Web. And the start of Web 3 could have been the launch of the Bitcoin network. People are not sure when really the launch of Web3 started, meaning the plans for how to interact more with the new era of Web3. Bitcoin has been there for many years, so it doesn't mean that Web3 started. Thinking about how we can move over to an era where we get more power back to each individual came with the blockchain. So the decentralized cryptocurrency needs neither banks nor central banks, but represents a peer-to-peer network based on blockchain technology. We need to remember now, because maybe you're feeling now that, wow, this cannot be legal or compliant. I mean, who should everyone just connect to their own parts and no government, no one has the insights? How would that be? Of course, this will be more and more regulated, and we already see it. It's not about being illegal. It's not about hiding or doing money laundering and so on. That is always connected. This question always comes with cryptocurrency. It's about bringing back more of, not needed to give out all our information to third parties, but that also means that we will see more regulations when it comes to Web3, when it comes to do interaction with sending, transferring money and so on. And that's normal. That's something that is part of Web3 too. So 5 years after the launch of the Bitcoin blockchain, the same technology was used to develop the Ethereum blockchain. So Ethereum makes it possible for the automation of token-based transaction, and they are using smart contracts to do this. So today, a variety of applications run on the Ethereum blockchain and also on other blockchains. So these include decentralized financial application that is shorted by DeFi. You have probably heard DeFi also. You will hear a lot about words, and we can do more trainings where we go in more to these things, because they need their own session to go into it. So now you will just hear the words, and you have probably already heard them, but they are also part of Web3. So DeFi means decentralized financial application or decentralized financial or structure. That's what DeFi is about. Centralized vs decentralized. Centralized, you have a third party, someone, for example, an organization, a company, a bank. Decentralized means that there is no big third party in the middle. Smart contracts replace centralized intermediaries, like the banks, for example, and they're also creating a trustless network. It's connected to a huge amount of people that still needs to approve your request, but it's not done by one single person. And the blockchain is transparent, meaning that you cannot, what to say, try to cheat the blockchain. Blockchain is transparent. Everyone can see what is happening in a blockchain. So the value chain becomes more efficient, and it will also be much cheaper to use this way instead. So the CEO of Binance, he was the 5th of February, he was tweeted on Twitter that he also sees the start of Web3 connected to the blockchain. So for him, very simple, in simple words, Web3 is about blockchain. So short and simple about non-fungible tokens and Web3 then. Same thing here. NFTs, non-fungible token, is a separate. We could do a training only about this one. So this will only be an overview connected to Web3. So non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, that you have probably heard a lot about also, is another Web3 application. So when people speak about NFTs, NFTs is a part of Web3. It's a part of Web3. It's an application connected to Web3, not connected to Web2, connected to Web3. And NFTs represent ownership of a uniquely identifiable digital asset, such as an ownership of a graphic, a picture, it can be a movie, it can be a song, a video, it could be any artwork, it could also be a document, it could be a domain, it could be a domain name. Actually, NFTs can be everything where you can register it in the blockchain and you have an ownership on it. That's an NFT. So non-fungible means that the NFTs are unique and they cannot be replaced. A token is documented in the blockchain. You know that when it comes to cryptocurrency, you have them registered in the blockchain. A non-fungible token is also a token. So that means that they are registered in the blockchain. And NFTs enable a transparent documentation of, for example, digital property rights. You can have even, we will probably see more and more real estate connected to NFTs, ownership in the blockchain, instead of having the normal documentation. Or for example, if you're going to trade gold for money or diamonds for money, and you don't know who should send what first, because maybe you are in different parts of the world, that can be created through NFTs, not the gold in itself, but the documentation about the ownership. And when that is created in smart contracts, you don't need to trust each other, because the smart contracts and the registration in the blockchain will take care of these parts. So that's why it's so useful. Let's see, did I forget something? No. So while it is irrelevant to users, which Bitcoin, for example, when it comes to non-fungible token, Bitcoin is a fungible token. And that means that if I send the Bitcoin to someone, I lend out one Bitcoin. This person then sends the Bitcoin to me. I don't need to have exactly the same Bitcoin. It doesn't matter. Same thing as if I borrow out $1, I don't need to have exactly the same dollar back. That doesn't matter. But when it comes to NFTs, non-fungible tokens, if I send someone an NFT and I get another NFT back, it's two separate, totally different NFTs. So that's why it's non-fungible. It's not replaceable. That is what it means. And the banknote example, $10, is also non-fungible, because a banknote has its own serial number. It has a number that is unique for all banknotes. So that is unique and it's non-fungible. But the difference here is that a banknote is not a token, because a banknote is not registered in the blockchain. So it's not a token. It's still non-fungible because it has its own serial number. So it's unique in itself, even if it doesn't matter for us if I get another dollar back, as I told you before. But it's not a token because it's not registered in the blockchain. An NFT is unique, it's non-fungible, cannot be replaced, because in that case you get another one back. That's why it's a non-fungible token, because it's also registered with your ownership in the blockchain. NFT, non-fungible token. So short and simple then about DAOs. You might have heard about DAOs too. And what is DAOs connected to Web3? That is also a part of Web3, DAO. If you see this, this is a very small picture right now. This is a legal entity, an employment contract, where you have a CEO on the top, you have top management, mid-level management, you have a non-management, you have lower non-management, and so on and so on. That's like a pyramid. You know, the structure of any organization, any company is like a pyramid when it comes to the legal entity. If we then check for a legal entity when it's connected to Web3 and to DAOs, it's totally different, because here you have no CEO on the top, you have no top management, you still have these people, but they are connected to a network, to other people that is connected to this entity, and everyone has the same voting rights. I will go through this. So Web3 could also replace conventional types of companies with new forms, actually, of decision making. So decentralized autonomous organization, that is DAO. Decentralized autonomous organization, DAO. That's what, when you hear people speak about, let's see if this can be a DAO, that is exactly what they mean. It's the new type of entity that can be created in a Web3. And it's very different from the Web2 entities, where you have the structure of a CEO and so on. So a DAO could replace traditional corporate hierarchies, the structure, by replacing centralized ownership with the governance mechanism based on tokens. So when it comes to a DAO, you have tokens involved. So with the DAO, the decisions are made democratically through voting, and the voting rights are based on the number of tokens that you own. So if you are part of any community and they are then creating a DAO, you have tokens in this community. The more tokens you have, the higher voting right you will have. So the employees of the DAO are also compensated for their work in tokens. So here we are not speaking about fiat currency when it comes to compensation for work done in a community that has a DAO. You will get paid in that community's token. So instead of receiving a salary set by a management, they are paid accordingly to their contribution to the DAO joint mission and the ownership rights in this DAO. And the goal is to create additional incentives. Sometimes you have also a voting right, even if you don't own a lot of tokens. Most often a community in a DAO always have a voting, maybe not a voting right, but they have always the right to explain, to express their opinions. And it's always open and transparent for everyone to put what they think is a better way, or not, whatever they have that they want to bring forward. They can do it to the whole community, and then the DAO will vote for if they approve it, if they think it's good or not. So this does not need to come from the founder of the community or the CEO of a former company, for example. So also democratic process could be token-based in Web3. So instead of representative democracy, so many English words that is, very new, where elected representatives make centralized decisions, direct democratically could experience a renaissance in Web3. So that is exactly what I mean when I say that normally you have a CEO in a legal entity that comes out with this and this is what we are going to do. And then if you are maybe in the top management, you also can give your view of it. When it comes to a DAO, this will not be, this will not be a decision until the whole DAO has been voting about it. So sometimes maybe what the founder has as a suggestion, the community is not thinking. So that means that if there becomes a voting, it will not go through because the community is not thinking it's a good decision. So this means that the community together with for example, the founders will make decisions together. That's a DAO. If you have a huge community, you still, that's why it's going also depending on, for example, how many tokens do you have in this community? Because if you have a huge community with many people owning tokens, we also know that this decision might not be what the majority are thinking. So that's why they go on, the more tokens you have, the more voting rights you also have in the DAO. But it's brought back to the community and not only to a small part on the top. So elected representatives are ultimately also intermediaries that the token-based governance organism could replace. You don't even need to have elected people anymore. The DAOs will actually be the organ that is making the decisions totally in a fully DAO. But then there is also different kind of DAOs, and many communities, they start with a legal entity, a normal entity. You have a founder of a project, you have maybe not a CEO, but you have founders. And first you set the foundation of your project before you move into DAO, where you let also the community have the voting right. That is the most common so far, that you have someone that has a very good idea, they have the expertise, they have also the money, the financial parts to create your project. Then you put in what you are planning for this project, and then when it has went through different steps, you create a DAO instead. So the community has the same rights as you have to actually have an important interaction with the project. Enough with DAOs now. So that's a little bit about DAOs. And you will probably also see a lot more about DAOs. When it comes to communities connected in cryptocurrency, in NFT projects, most of them that are serious and are thinking very long term, they also have a plan for DAO including in their plan. And then we go in short about the metaverse and Web3. Metaverse is also something you have probably heard a lot about. That is not any new era in itself. That's also a part of Web3. If Web3 is not there, there is no metaverse. So as I said, NFTs, metaverse is part of Web3. So Web3 is the big new area that is containing these different components. So all these use cases could eventually come together in one so-called metaverse. You can have DAOs, you can have NFTs, you can have communities connected into different metaverse. So we are not speaking about one metaverse at all. Each community could have their own metaverse, and we already start to see this happen. We have already different metaverse connected to some games, connected to some communities where people can interact. So the metaverse is a virtual reality where people can communicate, they can trade, they can play, they can learn, or otherwise interact with each other. And this is not possible in Web 2, where the users are the product. But Web 3, the user is also the owner. We bring back the ownership to the individual. If we look at this one now, after me speaking quite a lot about Web 1, Web 2, and especially Web 3, if we just summarize it now, we can see that in the 1990s, we started with Web 1. That was about read only. We got information to read. We used to log in with a username and a password. And Web 1, when this started, internet has already been there for a little while, where we could not log in with a username and password. We didn't have Google, for example. We had Netscape maybe in the beginning. So we could see applications like Google, Amazon, Yahoo, and Netscape. Then Web 2 came. Web 1 was developed into Web 2, and the platform economy started. We could also start to log in through a platform instead of only using username and a password. So Facebook came, Twitter came, Airbnb, Skype, and so on, where we have a big organization behind. And you and I, as a user, we actually give out the information about us to be able to enter into these platforms. And if something is really going good in the platform, the money is going to these organizations. Now with Web 3, we are moving into a token economy. So we move from information economy to a platform economy into a token economy. And here now, it's more and more about logging in through your own crypto wallet. We could see it now. A very good example is that Planet IX went in totally to Web 3 2 days ago, meaning that you cannot anymore use your username and password. You only connect through your wallet. That's your login way. So it's totally now Web 3 applied when it comes to Planet IX. And as I said, this will come more and more. It's still in a very, very early stage. We will also see a lot more about DAOs, so organization moving into DAOs. I think the connected people also have more parts into integration with the projects. OpenSea, we have Ethereum, we have Bitcoin, we have others also that is directly connected into Web 3. And we are, during the upcoming years, seeing more and more steps into this era. Is there any, or are there any challenges for Web 3? Yeah, of course it is. Anything that is new, anything that is huge comes with challenges. I think we know this since before, so I don't need to tell you this. But Web 3 is still in a very early stage, and there is many questions that still remains. The technological scalability. Yeah, that's how it is. You can read the word yourself. It's much simpler than listen to Matt this time. Technological scalability, yeah, is one of the critical challenges, of course. And same as it once was in Web 1, as the data proceeding speed, it's much faster speed in Web 2 today, so far, than it is in Web 3. For example, a Bitcoin transaction takes much longer time than if you do a Visa or MasterCard transaction. That's a fact today. So this is something that is still a challenge. There needs to be options for transactions in Web 3 to speed it up, to really have the same scalability as we had in Web 2. Also, the user experience of Web3 applications can't keep up with the Web 2 applications, still not yet. For example, it's more complicated for users to take a loan, for example, in a Web3 platform than going to a normal bank and take a loan in the Web 2 world. That's still also something, for example. Then there is the question of how decentralized is really Web3 as today. So as of today, the functionality of Web3 is still depending on the Web 2 infrastructure. Because if we just look to Amazon, for example, that is connected to Web 2, these services is still very, very important for most of the Web 3 applications to even exist. So it will not be that everything in Web 2 will just get closed and then everything new will be found out in Web 3. The Web 2 companies, these ones that today have really benefit while being in Web 2, they need to apply to Web 3. We could see Facebook already started this, going into Meta, also starting their work with the VR, Oculus, and so on. They are taking their step into Web 3. And more companies are doing this, but still there is an entity behind. So that will also take some time. So many centralized applications are also funded with venture capital firms. And that means that many of the token holders in this Web3 now, in that community, have a lot of tokens because they are also connected to Web2 venture capital firm. So that's also something that still needs to be worked out. So everyone more have the same possibilities with Web3. So these are challenges that are there, but of course, it will take some time. This will not happen during one night. Even if it will go much faster than it went from Web 1 to Web 2, from 1990s to 2000, that was around 10 years. It will not take 10 years to do all these changes into Web 3. Probably not, because it goes faster and faster, but it will not be ready next week or next month either. But many companies, especially when it comes to these big ones, are already in Web 3 with their thinking and have started to work on how to apply to move in there. So the future of Web 3, to realize the vision of a decentralized Web 3, there is still much innovation work to be done. So that said, the Web 2 did not come into being overnight either, exactly as I told you. It has evolved in 30 years from information economy to the platform economy. Then the token economy is the next logical evolutionary step. So we know that technology speed moves faster and faster and faster. So today it's not yet clear how this evolution will fully continue. The decentralized protocols will likely coexist with the centralized platforms, in the beginning at least. And then they will continue to gain market share, and then we will be in Web 3 in a certain amount of years. So decentralized financial protocols alone already have tens of billions of US dollars in assets under management today. So this means that when all the different Web 2 companies, and now we speak about the big ones, are taking the step into Web 3 fully, integrating into Web 3, we speak about a $10 trillion industry. $10 trillion industry. And according to the people that is following this, that is experts in their field. I said that no one is experts in Web 3 and NFTs yet, but now we're speaking about the technology behind. They are thinking that in 2026, many of these companies, 2026 is just 4 years away. most of the big companies have went into web3. That's only 4 years, and that's a $10 trillion industry. But the future will tell how fast it will go. There will still for sure be more different kind of challenges, but also new innovation that will speed up. So as the transition from Web 1 to Web 2, moving from Web 2 to Web 3 will be a gradual innovation procedure. It will become clear which technology and also business models that will be the best in the long term. So there are for sure opportunities for early adapters. That's why we bring this up with you now. Some of you will just feel that this is just too much information. I will take it when I must do it, and it's fine. Some of you will feel that, okay, I will start to listen more and learn a little bit more about it, because there is no era like this that has been so much open for us as an individual, for the average person. Web 2, as I said, was not for the average person unless you was a millionaire, billionaire, and or had a lot of experience and knowledge from studies, so you could implement yourself into Web 2. Web 3 is open up for a lot of these opportunities for each and one to actually also have the possibility to benefit from this $1 trillion industry that is on the move. So Web3 is a critical tool towards greater financial possibilities for everyone. And in the end, we will live in a world where technology is already a big part, and where we sooner or later needs to apply, exactly like we have applied to internet the last 25, 30 years. The same thing will happen here, but it will go faster. Exactly how, we don't know yet. But as I said, we can start to implement ourselves, to at least read and listen to a little bit about it every day. Don't go into technical terms. I put it out some technical terms here that might have been too much, but as I told you, this was for an information material. This is not usually giving out as a presentation like this. It's a document that is used to read. That's why it's so much text. But I hope that you have got at least a little bit more understanding about the difference between Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, where we are heading to, and why it could be very good for you